We're losing everything. Nathan Sterling, CEO, growled in desperation. This drug trial's a disaster. But Ellie, a mere waitress, scribbled a shocking formula on a napkin, a secret so bold it left a billion-dollar empire speechless. How could she outsmart his elite team? Before we start, let us know where you're listening from, Seattle, New York, or somewhere around the world. And when it ends, don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10. Let's get started. The lavish chandeliers of Le Ciel, Manhattan's fanciest restaurant, cast a warm, golden glow over the gleaming tables where the clinking of glasses blended with the murmurs of million-dollar deals. Ellie Harper, 28, floated between tables, her tray shaking slightly, apron still stained with coffee from today's chaotic lunch shift. Her dark brown hair was tied up messily, hazel eyes always observant, missing no detail. But tonight, her heart pounded for another reason, a secret that wasn't hers. At table 12, Nathan Sterling, CEO of Sterling Pharma, sat upright, his cold blue eyes sharp as steel. His black suit fit perfectly, but his voice trembled with anger. "We're losing millions," he barked at his team, his voice cutting through the gentle piano music. "The drug trials failed again. If we can't fix it, the company's finished." Ellie paused, tray tilting, her breath caught. An old memory from medical school surfaced. The drug formula they discussed, the enzyme dosage, was wrong. She had studied this compound, dreamed of becoming a doctor, before life took her mother and forced her to care for her sister Sophie. Ellie's hand clenched the napkin on her tray. "Don't do something stupid, Ellie," she whispered, but her fingers already had a pen, quickly sketching a correction. "Decrease the enzyme by 0.3 micromolars. Add a stabilizer." Each stroke matched her pounding heart, as if her whole future was at stake. "Stay calm," she muttered, almost dropping a wine glass. Spilling wine on the CEO isn't the best way to make an impression. She set the napkin under Nathan's wine glass, heart racing. Would he notice, or just toss it as trash? Table 12 gradually emptied. Nathan's team hurried off, leaving behind half-finished drinks and tense air. Nathan stood, his phone buzzing non-stop, but his gaze landed on the napkin. He picked it up, brows knitting. "What the hell is this?" he murmured, reading the handwritten formula. This formula, impossible. 30 PhDs had battled for weeks, burning millions of dollars, yet a waitress, had solved the problem that could save his multi-million-dollar empire in seconds. He turned, scanning the restaurant, but Ellie had already slipped behind the bar, polishing glasses and trying to hide a worried smile. "What did I just do?" she wondered, glass chiming softly at her touch. But Nathan's eyes, sharp and full of curiosity, remained on the napkin, as if it held the key to a much greater secret. In a tiny apartment a few blocks away, Ellie's 8-year-old sister Sophie was busy drawing pictures by the dim lamp. "You're home late, huh?" Sophie asked, coloring in her sketch. Ellie nodded, hugging her close. "I just did something crazy," she whispered, voice trembling. Sophie looked up, eyes shining. "Crazy like a superhero?" Ellie smiled but felt a heavy weight inside. She'd just bet their future on that napkin. The next morning, Nathan stood outside Le Ciel watching security footage. Ellie's image flashed on screen, furiously scribbling on the napkin, her eyes focused, more scientist than server. "Find her," he ordered his assistant firmly. "She's not ordinary." At the restaurant, Ellie was folding napkins when the manager pulled her aside. "Someone's here to see you. VIP. Don't mess this up." Ellie swallowed, heart pounding. If it's about the napkin, I'm either getting fired or... who knows? Nathan stood at the bar, tall, sharply dressed, but not as cold as she'd expected. "Ellie Harper?" he asked, holding up the napkin. "You wrote this?" Ellie nodded, throat tight. I thought it might help. Nathan looked at her, as if peering into her soul. You didn't just help. You just saved my empire. But who was this waitress? And how could a scrap of paper lead Nathan Sterling to a secret that would change his world forever? The clinking of glasses at Le Ciel still rang in Ellie Harper's ears as she stood before Nathan Sterling, her heart pounding so hard it could leap from her chest. The chandelier's gold light glinted on his sharp black suit, but Nathan's blue eyes weren't as cold as she thought. They were bright, both suspicious and curious, as if he were trying to solve a living riddle. You didn't just help, Nathan repeated solemnly, lifting the napkin like a fateful card. You just saved my multi-million-dollar empire. Ellie swallowed, her throat dry. I just thought it was right, she answered shakily. Nathan tilted his head, gaze locked. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Sterling Pharma. Don't be late. Ellie nodded, but as Nathan turned and his footsteps echoed across the polished floor, she felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. What did I just do? She whispered, gripping her apron. The restaurant manager frowned nearby. Don't just stand there, Ellie. Clear table 12. She hurried back, but Nathan's eyes haunted her, like he'd seen something in her that she herself never had. Outside, the cold Manhattan wind whipped her hair as she ended her shift. She walked fast, her worn sneakers thumping on the sidewalk. What if I'm wrong? She murmured, her breath a cloud in the air. A waitress correcting a drug formula? They'll laugh me out of the room. But the memory of her mother, of long med school nights, made her clench her fists. She gave up the doctor dream to care for Sophie. But that dream never really left her. In Sterling Pharma's penthouse office, Nathan sat in front of his laptop, blue glow lighting his tense face. His tie hung loose, a few dark hairs falling over his brow. Ellie's napkin lay on the desk, the scribbled notes almost a challenge. Who are you, Ellie Harper? He murmured, typing in the formula. The screen flashed. 92% effectiveness, up from his team's catastrophic 47%. He sank back, breathing heavily. 30 PhDs, millions of dollars, and a waitress did what they couldn't, he muttered, half amazed, half doubtful. He called his assistant through the intercom. Pull Ellie Harper's file. I want to know everything. Back at Ellie's apartment, the yellow lamp glowed soft over Sophie drawing on the floor. You're home late, huh? Sophie asked, coloring, her eyes shining. Ellie knelt and hugged her, Sophie's warmth calming her racing heart. I just met someone. Important, she stammered. Important like a superhero? Sophie asked, tilting her head. Ellie smiled but felt heavy inside. I don't know, Soph. Maybe I just opened a door, or walked into trouble. Nathan, still in his office, stood by the window gazing out at the blinking lights of Manhattan. He held the napkin, fingers tracing Ellie's handwriting. Where did you study? He repeated that question from Le Ciel, as if the answer hung just out of reach. He turned to his laptop, ran the simulation again. Result: the same. 92%. She's not ordinary, he muttered, but a chill snaked up his spine. If the formula was right, how had his team missed it? Something was off. The next morning, Ellie stood in front of her mirror, in the cleanest shirt she had, still feeling like an imposter. Do I look like I'm interviewing or apologizing? She asked, making Sophie laugh. You look like a superhero, just a nervous one. Sophie giggled, handing her a drawing, Ellie with angel wings and "You're number one" written beside it. Ellie hugged Sophie, eyes misty. Thanks, Sophie. I needed that more than you know. Before leaving Le Ciel, Ellie double-checked the glass racks, hands shaking. A co-worker, Sarah, teased, "Nervous about meeting a VIP? Just don't spill coffee on him." Ellie forced a smile. "Coffee's not the worry," she said quietly. "I'm worried I just jumped into something way over my head." Sarah shrugged. "Just try. Worst case, he fires you? Ellie shook her head. Worst case is I make Sophie hope, then let her down. As Ellie left the restaurant, morning sun glinting on her hair, she felt a heavy pressure settle on her chest. Nathan Sterling had opened a door, but what hid behind it? A chance to change her life, or a dangerous secret beyond her wildest imagination? The worn-out sneakers of Ellie Harper clacked against the marble hallway of Sterling Pharma, each step like a drumbeat in time, with her pounding heart. This skyscraper, with its glittering glass walls reflecting the Manhattan sunlight, felt like a foreign world, so different from the cramped apartment where she and Sophie squeezed together just to get by. She clutched her old canvas bag, her clean but slightly wrinkled white shirt making her wonder if she looked like a misfit among suits worth millions. "What am I even doing here?" she whispered, her breath shaky in the chilly blast of air conditioning. A waitress in a palace like this? Sophie would laugh at me. She glanced down at her bag, where Sophie's drawing, Ellie with angel wings, was folded neatly inside the side pocket. That drawing was the reason she was here, the small flame that kept her standing, even though her legs wanted to buckle. Nathan's assistant, a young woman with a polite smile as sharp as a knife, led her down the blinding white hallway. "Ms. Harper, the conference room is on the 32nd floor," she said, her voice even, but her eyes swept over Ellie like she was inspecting an oddity. Ellie forced a smile, trying not to show her anxiety. "Thank you," she replied quietly, but in her head she was screaming. "I don't belong here." The conference room door opened, and Ellie felt like she was stepping into an arena. The long, gleaming table surrounded by expensive suits, sparkling Mont Blanc pens and scrutinizing stares seemed ready to pierce through her. Nathan Sterling sat at the head of the table, his icy blue eyes scanning her. But was there a hint of warmth, or was it just her imagination? He slid Ellie's napkin across the table, her scrawled handwriting a silent challenge in a room filled with power. "Ellie Harper," he said, his deep voice resonating through the room. "Explain this." Ellie swallowed hard, her hand trembling as it touched the napkin, as if it were fragile glass. She took a deep breath, trying to recall the long medical study nights when her mom would sit beside her, pouring coffee and smiling with pride. "Your drug formula. The enzyme dosage is wrong," she started, her voice shaky at first but growing clearer. "It's too high, making the compound unstable. Reduce it by 0.3 micromolar and add a stabilizer and it'll work." She stopped, feeling all those sharp eyes on her. A woman, Dr. Claire Evans, hair pulled tightly back, scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "So who are you? A waitress who thinks she can make medication? Or just lucky enough to guess?" Ellie felt her cheeks burn, like she'd been slapped. She thought of Sophie, of the bills stacked on the kitchen table, of the dream of becoming a doctor that was put on hold when her mom was gone. "I don't have a PhD," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "But I do know how to stay calm when an entire restaurant is screaming for coffee at 8 a.m. This isn't much different." A few chuckles broke the tension in the room, but Claire still fixed her with a cold stare, as if to say, "You don't belong here." Nathan tapped his fingers on the table, his gaze never leaving Ellie, as if weighing a major decision. "Run the simulation," he ordered, voice calm but decisive. A technician quickly typed on the keyboard, and the giant screen lit up. The number appeared: 95% efficacy, up from a disastrous 47%. The room fell silent, with only the hum of the projector and the heavy breathing of someone in the corner. Claire frowned, lips pressed tightly but said nothing. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his eyes bright, half surprised, half curious. "You're right," he said, his tone like a judge delivering a verdict. "Ellie, You'll be a temporary consultant. Welcome to the team." Whispers rippled across the room like waves rolling in a glass box. Some faces looked curious, others displeased, as if Ellie had broken an unspoken rule. Her heart pounded, not with pride but with pressure. She thought of Sophie, the "You're number one" drawing, the promise to give her sister a better life. This was a chance to change everything. But would she have the strength to endure the scornful stares and whispered gossip? When the meeting ended, Ellie stepped into the hallway, still clutching her bag, sweat beading on her forehead. The air felt heavy, as if every step was a test. Nathan caught up with her, his black suit making him stand out in the bright corridor. "You never mentioned med school," he said in a low voice, eyes probing as if to see into her soul. Ellie shrugged, hiding her worry. "You didn't ask. Besides, I'm better at pouring coffee than talking about the past." Nathan gave her a rare smile, one that softened his sharp features. "You might be good at both, Ellie Harper." She smiled back, but her grin faded when a cold voice sounded behind her. "You think you belong here, waitress?" Claire stood there, high heels clacking ominously, eyes as sharp as blades. "Enjoy this moment. It won't last." Ellie stood silent, breath caught as the elevator doors closed with a metallic clang, echoing her own heartbeat. On her way home, Manhattan sunlight filtered through the trees, but Ellie felt a chill run down her spine. She'd stepped into a world full of power and schemes, where smiles masked intentions and whispers brought danger. Sophie waited for her at home, with a smile and bright, colorful drawings. But could Ellie protect her from the dark secrets lurking at Sterling Pharma? The clang of the elevator still haunted Ellie Harper as she faced the glass doors of Sterling Pharma's conference room, Manhattan sunlight glinting off mirror-like walls. Claire Evans's warning, "Enjoy this moment. It won't last," still echoed, cold as midnight wind. Ellie gripped her canvas bag, Sophie's drawing inside like a charm. "I'm not here to lose," she whispered, taking a deep breath and squaring her shoulders. She was no longer the shaky waitress from Le Ciel. She was Ellie Harper, the one who'd written a formula rescuing $1 million empire, and she would prove it. The conference room door opened, the atmosphere heavy as a brewing storm. A long, polished table, gold-rimmed glasses, expensive suits, and razor-sharp eyes all focused on her. Nathan Sterling sat at the head, his blue eyes not just icy but glinting with curiosity, as if seeing an unpolished gem. "Ms. Harper," he said, deep voice ringing out, "show us why your formula is the key." He slid the napkin across the table, Ellie's messy handwriting a declaration of war in this power room. Ellie stood by the whiteboard, marker in hand, heart pounding but steady. She thought of Sophie, her sister's smile when Ellie promised her a better future. "Think of a drug formula as a song," she began, voice certain, gaze sweeping across every face. "If the beat's off, the whole tune falls apart. Your enzyme is too high, throwing the compound off balance. Lower it by 0.3 micromolar and add a stabilizer, like tuning an instrument, to bring the melody back." She drew a smooth curve on the board, each stroke like a confident breath. Dr. Claire Evans, hair pulled tight, sat at the corner, scoffing. "So now we're learning music from a waitress? Is this a lab or an orchestra?" Her voice was knife-sharp, but Ellie didn't flinch. She smiled, eyes sparkling. "I can't play music, but I know how to quiet a whole restaurant when the soup's cold. This formula is the same. Get the rhythm right, everything works." A few laughs lightened the room, but Claire still glared as if wanting to rip away her confidence. James, a young technician with round glasses, spoke up hesitantly. "Her theory is scientifically solid, but we haven't tested it yet." Nathan tapped the table, not taking his eyes off Ellie. "Let's test it," he ordered, voice resolute. The main screen lit up. Efficacy 96%, compound fully stable. Silence filled the room, just the whir of the projector and someone shifting in their chair. Claire pursed her lips, her eyes dark, but didn't argue. Nathan leaned back, his gaze now shining. Not just acknowledgement, but as if he'd discovered a mystery. "Ms. Harper," he said, voice low and warm. "You weren't just right. You made this whole room rethink itself." Whispered conversations spread like ripples in a glass pond. Some nodded, curious. Others, like Claire, watched Ellie with suspicion. Ellie felt an electric surge. Not fear, but determination. She wasn't here to be liked. She was here to change the game. After the meeting, Ellie stepped into the hallway, sunlight streaming through wide windows to warm her skin. She paused, hand touching Sophie's drawing in her bag, and whispered, "We did it, Soph. But it's not over yet." She could feel stares from other employees, some curious, some cold, as if she were an outsider in their world. Nathan appeared beside her, his stride light but commanding on the marble floor. "You surprised me," he said, voice low, gaze intent, as if trying to see into her soul. "Not many people would stand up in that room." Ellie shrugged, giving a small smile. "I've faced a restaurant full of hungry customers at 9 p.m. This room was just a little more crowded." Nathan chuckled, a rare sound, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "You make things seem simple but never trivial. That's rare, Ellie." She smiled, her heart racing, not with pressure but with something sparked by Nathan's gaze, as if he truly saw her, not as a waitress, but as Ellie Harper, the girl who once dreamed big. But the moment vanished as Claire appeared down the hall, heels clicking out a countdown. "Don't get cocky, Harper," she warned, voice icy. "You might fool Nathan, but you won't fool me." Ellie stood still, her breath tight as Claire walked away, leaving a heavy silence. On her way home, Ellie sat on the bus, sunset streaming through the window, lighting her hair with a warm brown glow. She thought of Sophie, her sister's smile, her promise to give her a better life. But she also thought of Claire, of those cold eyes and the veiled threats. She had proven herself, but Sterling Pharma was hiding something, an even darker secret than Claire's warning. Did she have the strength to face it? Or would she be pulled into a game she never wanted to play? Manhattan's sunset bathed Ellie Harper's tiny apartment in gold, casting a warm glow over Sophie's painting. Ellie in a white lab coat, holding a test tube, her smile radiant as sunlight. The scratch of Sophie's colored pencil blended with the crackle of the old fireplace in the corner. Ellie sat on the threadbare sofa, clutching a lukewarm mug of tea, her gaze distant. Claire Evans' threat. "You may be able to fool Nathan, but you can't fool me," still echoed, as sharp as a blade stabbing into her heart. But what kept her standing wasn't fear. It was the look of trust in Nathan Sterling's eyes, as if he truly saw Ellie. The girl who once dreamed big, not just a waitress at Le Ciel. "I won't let Claire win, Soph," she whispered, stroking her sister's hair, fiery resolve burning in her chest. Sophie looked up, her eyes shining like stars. "You're my superhero, Ellie. Superheroes beat the bad guys, right?" Ellie smiled, tears shimmering, her heart warmed by her sister's innocence. "I'll try, Soph," she replied, hugging her tight, Sophie's warmth igniting a flame that chased away the chill from Claire's threat. She thought of her abandoned dream of becoming a doctor, all the bills piling up on the kitchen table, and the opportunity at Sterling Pharma, a door full of risks, but also the glimmer of hope for both their futures. A knock startled Ellie, her heart pounding. She opened the door, breath catching when she saw Nathan Sterling standing there, the black suit replaced by worn, rolled-up sleeves, his hair tousled by Manhattan's night wind. Next to him was James, the young tech from the conference room, round glasses slipping down his nose, wearing a shy but warm smile. "Nathan?" "James?" Ellie asked, her voice trembling, eyes flicking across the two men. Nathan raised a hand, holding out Sophie's drawing, Ellie in a lab coat, sent to his office by his assistant. "This little girl drew you as a doctor," he said, voice soft, eyes sparkling with curiosity. "I think I need to meet that doctor, not just the waitress." James smiled, pushing up his glasses. "I told the boss you're not just good at formulas. You're good at making people listen," he said, sincere. "I looked at your formula, Ellie. It's genius. I want to help." Ellie blinked, surprised by James's support. He was the only one in the meeting today who looked at her not with suspicion, but with admiration, as a new friend. Ellie invited them in, and suddenly her small apartment, with its chipped wooden table and old sofa, felt cozier. Sophie ran out, eyes bright. "Mr. Medicine Man?" she exclaimed, pointing at Nathan, then turned to James. "And you're Mr. Smart Glasses?" James laughed, scratching his head in embarrassment. "Smart Glasses? I'll have to work on that nickname." Ellie burst out laughing, her heart racing, not from stress but from this very moment. Nathan Sterling, millionaire CEO, and James, the young tech, standing in her apartment, joking with Sophie. They sat down. Nathan awkwardly took the tea Ellie offered, fingers brushing over a crack in the cup. "I reviewed your formula," he said, voice serious but warm. 97% efficacy. You didn't just save my multi-million-dollar empire, Ellie. You made me wonder what else I've missed." Ellie only shrugged, hiding her pride. "I just do what I know," she replied, glancing at Sophie, who was already drawing another picture. Nathan as a caped superhero. James leaned forward, voice low and passionate. "Ellie, I've been at Sterling Pharma for 3 years, and nobody has made the whole boardroom go silent like you did today. Claire. She's jealous you did what she couldn't." Ellie blinked, taken aback by his frankness. "Thank you, James," she said quietly but sincerely. "But I don't know how long I can last." James smiled, eyes lighting up. "You'll last, because you're not fighting alone. I'm with you." Nathan looked at James, then at Ellie, his gaze deeper, as though he wanted to say something but stopped short. "Claire doesn't like to lose," he said quietly. "But I need you to stay, Ellie. Not just for the formula, but because you bring a new perspective. A perspective we've neglected for too long." Ellie met his eyes, breath catching. "Perspective doesn't pay the bills, Nathan," she answered, voice soft but sharp. He smiled, warmth in his eyes like the sunset out the window. "Maybe not, but it builds dreams, and that's worth more." Late at night, after Nathan and James had left, Ellie sat beside Sophie, now deep asleep, clutching her new drawing, one of Ellie, Nathan, and James as a superhero team. Ellie smiled, but a phone call made her jump. "Ms. Harper." James's voice crackled through the phone, hesitant but urgent. "I looked over the old data, the original formula. It looks like it was deliberately altered. Someone doesn't want it to succeed. You need to see this first thing tomorrow." Ellie's heart tightened, gripping her phone. The crackle of the fireplace sounded like a countdown, the dim lamplight illuminating Sophie's drawing, reminding her of everything at stake. She now had an ally in James, trust from Nathan, but Sterling Pharma was hiding a secret darker than Claire's threats. Would she have the strength to face the truth, or be swept up in a storm greater than her and Sophie's dreams? The cold blue light from the Sterling Pharma laboratory computer screen shone on Ellie Harper's tense face, highlighting beads of sweat on her brow. the computer's fan word blending with her racing heartbeat as she scrolled through the old data James, the young tech, had sent via email late last night. His words still echoed. The original formula. Looks like it was deliberately changed. Ellie tightened her grip on the mouse, fingers trembling. Someone didn't want it to succeed, she whispered, eyes fixed on the screen, where the numbers told a story even darker than Claire Evans' threat. The lab was empty, just the ticking wall clock counting down time. Ellie had arrived before dawn, needing to check the evidence before the Sterling Pharma team arrived. She sifted through old reports, and one detail made her heart clench. The original drug formula, before its failure, had been subtly altered. The enzyme dosage doubled, enough to destroy its effectiveness without anyone noticing. This wasn't a mistake, she murmured, her voice shaking. This was sabotage. The lab door burst open and James entered, round glasses slipping down his nose, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. "What did you find?" he asked, voice low but fervent. Ellie turned, her eyes lighting up at the sight of him, her only ally in this world of suspicion. "James, you were right. Someone deliberately sabotaged the formula. Look." She pointed at the screen, showing a clearly edited data line. James pushed up his glasses, frowning. "Damn. That's Claire's digital signature. She's behind this." Ellie felt blood rush to her head, like she'd been slapped by an invisible hand. "Claire?" she repeated, voice choked. "She wanted the company to fail? Why?" James shrugged, offering her a coffee, the steam fogging his glasses. "Maybe to protect her reputation. She's the team lead. If the formula fails, she blames someone else. But when you showed up..." He smiled, eyes sparkling. "You exposed her, Ellie. And she really doesn't like that." Ellie took the coffee, heat spreading into her hands, but her heart was cold. She thought of Sophie, the superhero drawing, her promise of a better future. "If I expose Claire, she won't let it go," she admitted, voice low. James leaned forward, voice sincere. "You're not fighting alone, Ellie. I'm here. And so is Nathan." Ellie gave a wan smile, touched by his trust. "Thank you, James. I just don't know if I'm strong enough." James pushed up his glasses, grinning. "You silenced the whole boardroom. Don't sell yourself short. But, don't let me finish this coffee or I'll start talking even more." Ellie laughed, a rare sound that cut through the tension. But the moment evaporated when Nathan Sterling entered, slick in his black suit, his hair tousled by Manhattan's dawn breeze. "Ms. Harper James," he said, eyes taking them both in, lingering on Ellie just a bit longer. "I heard about the old data. What's going on?" Ellie drew a deep breath, pointing to the screen. "The original formula was sabotaged, Nathan, and the trail leads to Claire." Nathan frowned, his expression darkening like a sky before a storm. "Claire?" he repeated, voice grim. "She's the project lead. If that's true, this isn't just a mistake. This is betrayal." He approached the screen, fingers brushing over the data, his face tight. "We'll need solid evidence. If we get this wrong, she'll destroy us before the board." Ellie's heart squeezed, but she straightened her back, her eyes clear. "I'll get the proof," she stated firmly. "Not for me, but for this company. And for people like Sophie, who deserve a medicine that works." Nathan looked at her, his eyes softening, as if he could see straight into her heart. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met, Ellie," he said, voice low and nearly a whisper. "You fight for what's right, even when it hurts you." Ellie blushed, heart pounding, but she turned away, refocusing on the screen. "I'm not used to praise," she said quietly, "but I'm used to seeing things through." James smiled, whispering to Nathan, "She's even more stubborn than you, boss." Nathan laughed, a rare sound lighting up the room. I'm starting to think so. But the lightness vanished when Claire walked in, heels clicking on the floor, her eyes sharp as knives. Ms. Harper, James, she said, voice cold, eyes flicking to the screen. Working early or looking for trouble? Ellie felt her breath catch, but she stood tall, meeting Claire's gaze. We're searching for the truth, she answered sharply. And it's not as pretty as you'd like. Claire smiled, but it never reached her eyes. Careful, waitress, she warned, her voice low and dangerous. Play with fire, you'll get burned. She left, and a heavy silence fell, like the air before lightning strikes. James bumped Ellie's shoulder, speaking softly. She's scared of you, Ellie. That's why she talks like that. That night, Ellie returned home, dim light shining over Sophie, still asleep, clutching her newest drawing, Ellie, Nathan, and James as a superhero team. Ellie sat beside her, stroking Sophie's hair, thinking of Nathan's words, James's support, and Claire's icy glare. She had found allies, a spark of friendship and trust, but Sterling Pharma was hiding a dark secret far greater than she imagined. Could she expose Claire before the storm hits? Or will she be swept up in a dangerous game larger than her and Sophie's dreams? Rain tapped steadily against the window of Nathan Sterling's office at Sterling Pharma, the gray light of Manhattan casting a chill over the room, a reflection of the brewing storm inside Ellie Harper. She stood before Nathan's desk, hands gripping the stack of documents James had printed, proof that Claire Evans had deliberately sabotaged the original drug formula. The ticking of the wall clock echoed like her own heartbeat, each passing second a reminder of the risks she was taking. Claire did this, Ellie said, her voice steady but trembling, pointing at the digital signature on the screen. She increased the enzyme dosage to destroy the project, then blamed it on the team. Nathan stood behind his desk, his black suit tailored to perfection, his blue eyes darkening like the sky before a storm. This is a serious accusation, Ellie, he said, voice low as his hand skimmed the documents. If you're wrong, you'll become a target for the entire board. Ellie swallowed dryly, thinking of Sophie, the superhero drawing, the promise to give her sister a better future. I'm not wrong, she replied, gaze unwavering. And I'm not afraid of Claire. But I need you to believe me. Nathan looked at her, a silence expanding in the room as if he were weighing the fate of the world. I believe you, he said, voice barely more than a whisper. Not just because of the formula, but because you never chose the easy way. Ellie felt her heart race, not out of pressure but at Nathan's gaze, as if he could see her heart, not merely a waitress or an accidental advisor. James, standing in the corner, pushed his round glasses up his nose, his voice full of conviction. I triple-checked, boss. Claire's digital signature is on every modified file. She can't deny it. Nathan nodded, his eyes never leaving Ellie. Call an emergency meeting. I want Claire to explain herself before the whole team. James nodded, but his eyes lingered on Ellie with concern. She'll fight back, Ellie. Be careful. Ellie managed a faint smile. Thanks, James. But I've bussed tables in a restaurant during rush hour. A meeting can't scare me. James laughed, shaking his head. You're a true warrior, but I still think you could use some armor. The meeting took place in the large conference room, the atmosphere as heavy as a courtroom. Claire stood at the head of the table, her high heels tapping sharply as she walked in, her glance as keen as a blade. Ms. Harper, she said coolly, are you accusing me of sabotaging my own project? You, a waitress with no degree and no credentials? Blood rushed to Ellie's cheeks, but she stood tall, her voice steady. I don't need a degree to see the truth. Your data speaks louder than words. She slid the folder across the table, each page like a bullet. Claire skimmed, her smile stiffening before she regained her composure. "This is a mistake," she replied, sweetly but venomous. "You're just trying to cover up that you don't belong here." A few people in the room whispered, suspicion in their eyes. Ellie felt the floor tilt beneath her, but Nathan's gaze, resolute, supportive, kept her grounded. "That's enough." Nathan's voice rang through the room, silencing all whispers. "We'll conduct an internal investigation. Every document, every digital signature will be reviewed independently." He looked at Claire, his eyes cold as steel. "If you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about." Claire pressed her lips together, her glare sweeping over Ellie, as if wanting to devour her. "You'll regret this, Ms. Harper," she hissed as she passed by, so softly that only Ellie could hear. After the meeting, Ellie sat alone in the lab, blue light from the computer screen illuminating her tired face. She thought of Sophie, her smile, the promise not to give up. But the pressure from Claire and the suspicious glances made her feel as if she were walking a tightrope over a precipice. James entered, carrying a paper cup of coffee. "You all right?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. Ellie smiled, but her eyes betrayed fatigue. "I'm fine, James. Just not used to being hated by a whole room." James sat beside her, pushing up his glasses. "They don't hate you. They're afraid of you. You make them face themselves, and nobody likes that." He paused, voice softer. "I used to be like them, Ellie. Thought a degree was everything. But you made me believe heart matters more than paperwork." Ellie blinked, touched by his sincerity. "Thank you, James. Having you here makes everything easier." James smiled, his eyes twinkling. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere. Unless you need more coffee, then I'll dash right out." Ellie laughed, lightening the tense air. But the moment shattered when her phone buzzed. An anonymous text flashed on her screen. "Give up, Ms. Harper, before things get worse." Ellie's heart clenched, her hands trembling as she stared at her phone. The sound of rain drumming harder outside seemed ready to drown her in fear. She stood up, eyes resolute. "I'm not giving up," she whispered, grasping Sophie's drawing tight in her pocket. But as she left the lab, the dim corridor lights cast her shadow on the wall, a reminder that Sterling Pharma was hiding a secret darker than Claire's betrayal. Would she expose the truth before it destroyed her? Or would she be swept away by a storm she couldn't escape? The stage lights of the New York Pharma Conference blazed, spotlighting Ellie Harper like a torch, highlighting her dark brown hair tied high and hazel eyes shining with resolve. Applause from hundreds of spectators, CEOs, scientists, investors, roared like breaking waves. But Ellie's heart pounded not because of the crowd, but because of the file in her hands. Undeniable proof Claire Evans had sabotaged Sterling Pharma's original drug formula. The anonymous message, "Give up, Ms. Harper, before things get worse," still haunted her. But she stood tall, shoulders back, like a warrior ready to face the storm. She glanced at the front row, where Nathan Sterling sat, his black suit sharp, blue eyes locked on her, not just with trust, but as if making a silent promise. Next to him sat James, the young technician, round glasses slipping down his nose, his shy but encouraging smile on display. "You've got this, Ellie," James had whispered before she walked on stage, his voice a cool breeze amidst the heat of pressure. Ellie smiled, thinking of Sophie, the superhero drawing, the promise for a better future for her sister. "This is for you, Soph," she whispered, squeezing the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ellie began, her voice trembling but quickly steadying. "Sterling Pharma stands at a crossroads. Our new drug failed, not because of science, but because of betrayal." Whispers rippled through the hall, like waves before a storm. Ellie lifted the folder, her voice sharp as a blade. The original formula was deliberately changed. The enzyme dose doubled to ensure failure. And the trail leads to one of our own, Claire Evans. The room fell silent, filled only with the hum of air conditioning and the shuffle of seats. Claire, standing backstage, went pale, her high heels tapping sharply as she strode out, her eyes cutting like knives. "Ms. Harper," she said, sweetly venomous, "you're slandering me before the whole pharmaceutical world. A waitress with no degree, accusing me." Blood rushed to Ellie's face, but she stood unwavering. "I don't need a degree to see the truth," she replied, her voice ringing across the hall. "Your data speaks louder than words, and I have proof." She switched on the big screen, displaying files with Claire's digital signature, each line like a bullet straight at her opponent's career. The audience gasped, whispers swelling into a buzz. Claire pressed her lips together, her gaze darting at Ellie, as if hoping to swallow her whole. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice trembling but trying to keep composure. "You're just trying to ruin me to cover your own incompetence." Nathan stood from the front row, his voice cold and commanding as he climbed the stage, gaze like steel. "Enough, Claire," he said. "We independently verified the data. Your digital signature is on every altered file. You didn't just betray the company, you betrayed the patients who need this medicine." The hall erupted in thunderous applause as security entered and escorted Claire off stage. She looked back over her shoulder, her eyes cold as ice. "You'll pay for this," she hissed, barely audible above the noise. Ellie stood frozen, breath caught, but the audience's applause pulled her back to reality. She looked at Nathan, his eyes shining, not just with pride, but as if promising he'd always be there for her. James in the front row gave her a thumbs up, grinning. "You really are a superhero, Ellie," he shouted, drawing laughter from those around him. Ellie smiled, her heart still pounding, not just from victory, but from the anonymous message. Was Claire behind it, or was there a bigger secret yet to reveal? After the conference, Ellie stood in the hotel corridor, the chandelier lights casting a glow over her face. Tired, but radiant. James ran up, his round glasses gleaming under the lights. "You did it, Ellie," he exclaimed, excitement ringing in his tone. "You just made the whole industry remember your name." Ellie smiled, but her gaze was distant. "I just want Sophie to be proud," she said softly. James touched her shoulder, sincerity in his voice. "She already is. And so am I. You didn't just save the company, you made me believe anyone can change the world." Nathan appeared, his dark suit making him stand out in the bright hallway. "You surprised me again," he said, voice low, his glance deep as if wanting to hold her there. "You didn't just stand up for the truth. You stood up for those nobody notices." Ellie blushed, heart racing. "I just did what I thought was right," she replied gently. Nathan smiled, his gaze warm like sunset. "And that's why I can't take my eyes off you, Ellie Harper." Ellie's breath caught, not from pressure but from the way Nathan looked at her, as if he saw the entire world inside her. But the moment faded as her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous text. "You've won this battle, but the game isn't over." Ellie clutched her phone, hand trembling as the hallway seemed to blur. She looked at Nathan and then James, feeling the warmth from their trust and friendship, yet also sensing the storm that lay ahead. That night, Ellie returned to her apartment, the dim light illuminating Sophie, sleeping soundly with a new drawing. Ellie, Nathan, and James, standing together like a superhero team. She sat by her sister, stroking Sophie's hair, thinking of today's victory, but also of the anonymous texts. She had exposed Claire, but Sterling Pharma was harboring a secret darker than Claire's betrayal. Would she have the strength to face it, or would she be drawn into a dangerous game beyond her wildest imagination? Golden leaves gently fall in Central Park. Soft autumn sunlight streams through the trees, turning Ellie Harper's hair a warm brown. The rustle of dry leaves under her feet mixes with the distant laughter of children. But Ellie's heart remains heavy. The anonymous message, "You won this round, but the game isn't over," still haunts her, a shadow lingering behind her victory and exposing Claire Evans at the conference. She clutches Sophie's drawing in her bag, a picture of Ellie, Nathan, and James as a superhero team that makes her smile but also reminds her of what's at stake. Nathan Sterling walks beside her, his black coat fluttering in the autumn wind. His blue eyes, usually cold, are now gentle, as if he wants to enfold her entire world. "Are you okay, Ellie?" he asks, his voice low and caring. Ellie shrugs, trying to hide her fear. "I just made the whole pharmaceutical industry remember my name," she says softly, voice trembling. "But I'm scared I've awakened something bigger than Claire." Nathan stops, gently touches her shoulder, and his warmth startles her. "You're not fighting alone," he says, his gaze deep as an autumn lake. "I'm here, Ellie. Not for the company, but for you." Ellie blushes, her heart beating fast, not from pressure but from Nathan's words, an unspoken promise. She turns away, her eyes drifting to the children playing tag in the park. "I used to dream of being a doctor," she whispers, her voice choked. "But when Mom died, I dropped out to take care of Sophie. I'm scared. If I go on, I'll let her down." Nathan leans in, voice low. "You're not letting Sophie down. You're showing her a woman can change the world." Sophie, running ahead, turns back, her curls bouncing. "Ellie, Mr. Nathan," she calls, holding up a big golden leaf. "This is like a medal, right? For you, 'cause you beat the bad guys." Ellie laughs, tears shimmering, kneeling to hug Sophie. "Thank you, Soph," she says, voice shaking. "But I'm not a hero yet." Sophie tilts her head, grinning. "You're my hero, even if Mr. Nathan has bad taste in music." Nathan chuckles, scratching his head awkwardly. "Bad taste? I thought I had style." Ellie bursts out laughing, her laughter chasing away some of the fear in her heart. In that moment, under the autumn sun, she feels a glimmer of hope, as if the old wounds, from her mother, from a forgotten dream, are healing. James appears, his round glasses slipping down his nose, holding a large envelope. "Ellie," he calls, excited. "You need to see this." He hands her the envelope, his eyes shining. "NYU sent it to the office. They heard about the conference, about your formula. They want you back, a full scholarship to finish medical school." Ellie blinks, hands shaking as she opens the envelope. A letter, printed on thick paper, confirms the scholarship and an invitation back to NYU. Tears fall, not from sadness, but because a dream she thought long dead is coming back to life. "James, how did you get this?" she asks, voice emotional. James pushes up his glasses, smiling. "I have friends at NYU. When they heard about you, they couldn't pass it up. You deserve it, Ellie." Nathan looks at her, his gaze shining. "You didn't just save my company," he says softly. "You're saving your own dreams." Ellie smiles, her heart lightening as if a burden has been lifted. But the moment shatters when her phone vibrates. Another anonymous message. "You think you've won? Look closer." Ellie's heart tightens, her hand trembling as she reads. She glances at Nathan, then James, feeling the warmth of their friendship and trust, but also sensing the storm ahead. "Something's not right," she whispers, voice shaking. James touches her shoulder, earnest. "Whatever it is, you're not alone, Ellie. We're a team." Ellie nods, but her gaze drifts, lingering on the blazing yellow trees. She thinks of Sophie, of the NYU scholarship, of Nathan and James, who are helping rebuild her dreams. But the anonymous message, like a shadow, reminds her that Sterling Pharma still hides a secret, darker than Claire's betrayal. Will she have the courage to open her heart to love and her dreams, or be swept up in a storm greater than anything she's ever faced? The warm, golden lights of Le Ciel, the restaurant where it all began, bathed the small table Nathan Sterling reserved, a reminder of the napkin that changed Ellie Harper's life. The clink of wine glasses blends with the soft piano music. But Ellie's heart pounds, not because of the romantic atmosphere, but because of Nathan's eyes, deep, as if he wants to say something bigger than thank you. She wears a simple blue dress, not her usual apron, but still feels lost among the sparkling lights. The anonymous message, "You think you've won? Look closer," still haunts her, a shadow lurking behind the victory over Claire Evans. Nathan sits across from her, black suit open, blue eyes sparkling under the chandelier. "Ellie," he says, his deep voice almost a whisper. "You didn't just save my company. You made me look at myself again." He pauses, fingers tracing the rim of his wineglass, searching for words. "I built a multi-million-dollar empire, but I was lonely in it. Until I met you." Ellie blushes, heart racing, but she looks away, eyes drifting over the couples laughing in the restaurant. "Nathan, I don't know what I can give you," she says, voice trembling. "I'm just a waitress, with a little sister to care for and a dream that just came back to life." Nathan leans forward, his hand gently touching hers, his warmth making her jump. "You're the one who makes me want to really live, Ellie," he says, voice low and full of feeling. "I don't need you to be anyone else. I just want you and Sophie with me." He pulls a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple gold ring, not flashy, but shining like a promise. "Marry me, Ellie. I want to build a family with you and Sophie." Ellie feels her breath catch, tears shining in her eyes. She thinks of Sophie, the superhero drawing, the NYU scholarship, beams of light in her darkness. "Nathan," she whispers, voice thick with emotion. "I'm scared. Scared of the past, of failing, of not being good enough for you." Nathan smiles gently, his gaze kind. "You were good enough to save my company, good enough to make me fall in love with you. And I know you're good enough to make Sophie happy." Sophie, sitting at the next table with James, eavesdropping all along, jumps out of her seat, curls bouncing. "Ellie, say yes," she shouts, making the whole restaurant turn. "Mr. Nathan can't cook, but he's really nice." James laughs, pushing up his round glasses. "Listen to her, Ellie. I bet he'll learn to cook. Someday." Ellie bursts out laughing, tears streaming down her cheeks, her heart feeling lighter as if a burden has been lifted. She looks at Nathan, his eyes like a flame warming her whole world. "Okay," she says, voice shaking. "I will, Nathan." The room erupts with applause, as if all of Le Ciel is celebrating with them. Nathan slips the ring onto Ellie's finger, his hand trembling, and they embrace. The gentle piano music seems to sing their vow. But the moment vanishes when Ellie's phone vibrates. Another anonymous message. "You think you're safe? We're still watching." Ellie's heart tightens, her hand gripping the ring, the restaurant lights seeming to dim. She looks at Nathan, then Sophie and James, feeling the warmth of love and friendship, but also sensing an oncoming storm. "What's wrong?" Nathan asks, worry in his voice. Ellie shakes her head, forcing a smile. "It's just, I need time to get used to being happy," she says softly. But inside, she knows this message isn't from Claire. It's from a darker secret, waiting in the shadows of Sterling Pharma. That night, Ellie returns to her apartment, dim lights shining over Sophie, asleep with a new drawing. Ellie and Nathan, hand in hand, Sophie holding a flower. She sits beside her, stroking Sophie's hair, thinking about the NYU scholarship, Nathan's proposal, and the anonymous messages. She's found love, allies, and a revived dream. But Sterling Pharma still hides a secret more dangerous than anything she's ever faced. Will she have the courage to keep moving forward? Or will she be swept up in a new storm threatening her newfound happiness? The dim light from the hanging lamps in the Sterling Pharma office cast a glow on Ellie Harper's tense face, highlighting hazel eyes shining with determination. The ticking of the wall clock, counting down like a timer, mingled with the tapping of rain outside the window as if trying to drown her in pressure. She sat before her computer screen, fingers flying across streams of data, searching for the source of the anonymous message. "We are still watching." That threat, as cold as the Manhattan night wind, had haunted her ever since Nathan Sterling's proposal at Le Ciel. She gripped the gold ring on her finger tighter, its coolness reminding her of the happiness now under threat. James, with his round glasses slipping down his nose, stood by her side, his eyes worried yet full of passion. "I traced the IP of the message," he said in a low voice, pointing at the screen. "It wasn't from Claire. There's someone inside the company, other than her, manipulating the data." Ellie's heart clenched. Her hand trembled as she looked at the lines of code on the monitor. "Someone behind Claire?" she whispered, her voice choking. "What do they want?" James pushed up his glasses, his tone sincere. "They want you to quit, Ellie. But you're not that kind of person." Ellie offered a weak smile, touched by James's trust. "I won't give up," she said firmly, eyes resolute. "But I need to know who's behind this." James nodded, his fingers darting across the keyboard like the wind. "I hacked into the internal system. There's a hidden account sending messages from a backup server. And it leads to the finance department." The office door swung open and Nathan entered, black suit fitted, hair ruffled from hurrying from a meeting. "Ellie, James," he said, his blue gaze sweeping over them, resting on Ellie with a hint of worry. "What's going on?" Ellie took a deep breath, pointing at the screen. "The anonymous message wasn't from Claire," she said confidently. "Someone in the finance department is playing dirty, Nathan. They don't just want to sabotage the medication. They want to bring down the whole company." Nathan frowned, his eyes darkening like the sky before a storm. "Finance department," he repeated, his voice deep but sharp. "That's Victor Hayes's turf, the CFO. If it's true, this is top-level betrayal." He stepped up to the screen, fingers gliding over the data, face tense. "We need solid evidence. If we're wrong, we'll lose everything before the board." Ellie felt her heart racing, but she stood tall, locking eyes with Nathan. "I'll find the evidence," she declared, her voice steady. "Not for me, but for Sophie. For you. And for the patients who need this medicine." Nathan looked at her, his eyes softening as if wanting to embrace her entire world. "You never cease to amaze me," he murmured, almost a whisper. "But be careful, Ellie. Victor's not like Claire. He's a sly old fox." James nodded, voice low. "I'll support you, Ellie. But Nathan's right. Victor could destroy everything if we're not careful." Ellie smiled, eyes sparkling. "I once waited tables during peak hour chaos," she said lightly but sharply. "What's one old fox to me?" James laughed, pushing up his glasses. "You really are a warrior, Ellie. But this time, I suggest you wear a helmet." They worked through the night, the sound of typing mingling with the rain outside, composing a tense symphony. Ellie and James traced financial transactions, discovering a secret account transferring money overseas, linked to Victor Hayes. "He's selling drug data to competitors," Ellie whispered, her voice shaking. "He wants Sterling Pharma to collapse so he can profit." James clenched his fists, anger in his eyes. "We've got him, Ellie. But we'll have to present this to the board. First thing tomorrow morning." The next morning, in the large boardroom, the atmosphere was as heavy as a courtroom. Victor Hayes, A middle-aged man with silver hair and eyes sharp as blades, sat at the head of the table, his smile confident, but cold. "Ms. Harper," he said smoothly. "Are you bringing drama again? I thought you were done with Claire." Ellie stood tall, holding a folder, her voice cutting. "This isn't drama, Mr. Hayes. This is the truth. You sold drug data to sabotage the company." The room fell silent, only the whirring of the projector filling the space. Ellie turned on the screen, displaying the financial transactions and anonymous messages linked to Victor. The board murmured, their eyes shifting from Ellie to Victor. He pressed his lips together, his smile vanishing. "You have no proof," he said, his voice trembling despite trying to sound composed. Nathan stood up, his gaze steely. "We have it all, Victor. You betrayed the company, and you'll pay the price." Applause broke out, thunderous, as security escorted Victor out. Ellie stood motionless, her breath hitched, but Nathan's steadfast, proud gaze kept her grounded. James patted her shoulder, beaming. "You did it, Ellie. A real superhero." Ellie laughed, but her heart was still pounding, not for victory but because of a hunch. Was this really the end of the storm? That night, Ellie returned to her apartment. The dim light shone on Sophie, sound asleep with a new drawing. Ellie and Nathan hand in hand, James holding a cup of coffee. She sat next to her, stroking Sophie's hair, thinking about the NYU scholarship, Nathan's proposal, and today's triumph. But that intuition, like a dark shadow, reminded her that Sterling Pharma might still be hiding one last secret. Would she be able to protect her new love and family? Or would she face a challenge greater than any she'd overcome? Morning sunlight filtered through the window of the new Brooklyn apartment, shining on piano keys as Sophie Harper played a clumsy but cheerful melody, music dancing through the cozy space. Ellie Harper, now an outstanding medical student at New York University, stood in the little kitchen, wearing her white coat, her radiant smile bright as the sunlight. A year had passed since Nathan Sterling's proposal at Le Ciel, and the gold ring on her finger glittered, a promise fulfilled. 3 months ago, she and James had uncovered Sterling Pharma's final secret, extinguishing all schemes and clearing the skies for her family. Ellie set a tray of freshly baked cookies on the table, the vanilla scent blending with Sophie's laughter. "Ellie, Uncle Nathan will burn the kitchen if you let him near the oven," Sophie exclaimed, curly hair bouncing as she rushed to hug her sister. Ellie laughed, ruffling her hair. "He saved $1 billion empire, but when it comes to cookies, I have to save him." Nathan stood in the kitchen doorway, sleeves rolled up, pretending to scowl. "I'm not that bad," he said, blue eyes sparkling, the smile softening the once sharp features. "But if I do burn the kitchen, Sophie, you'll have to clean up." Sophie giggled, running off to grab her colored pencils to draw another picture. Today is special. It's Ellie and Nathan's wedding day. A simple ceremony in Central Park, where falling yellow leaves and autumn sunlight made everything glow like a painting. Sophie, as the flower girl, tossed rose petals down the aisle, her smile as bright as the sun. James, the young technician and now Ellie's best friend, sat in the front row, round glasses gleaming, applauding loudly. "Ellie, you're a star," he shouted excitedly. "From waitress to med school bride, I demand a medal for best friend." Ellie walked down the aisle, her simple white dress hugging her figure, eyes locked on Nathan waiting at the end, his gaze as if embracing her entire world. As they exchanged vows, the rustle of autumn leaves blended with Ellie's trembling voice. "You've given me a family," she said, tears shimmering. "Not just with Sophie, but with the dreams I thought I'd lost." Nathan took her hand, voice low, full of emotion. "You've given me a reason to truly live, Ellie. I promise to be by your side and Sophie's, forever." Applause rose like waves in the autumn air as they kissed under sparkling sunlight. Sophie rushed over, hugging them both, shouting, "Now we're an official superhero team!" James laughed, pushing up his glasses. "I'm still in charge of coffee for the team, right?" Ellie laughed, tears rolling down her cheeks, her heart lighter than ever, as if finally finding her true home. 3 months earlier, Ellie and James had solved Sterling Pharma's final secret. In the lab, under the cold blue light, they found emails from Victor Hayes to a competitor, exposing a plan to sabotage the entire drug line. "He didn't act alone," James whispered tensely as they sat before the screen. "It's a network, but we can cut it off." Ellie, her eyes resolute, presented the evidence to the board, exposing the entire plot. The board not only fired Victor but also sued the competitor, helping Sterling Pharma regain its reputation and thrive. Ellie was appointed chief scientific advisor, becoming a symbol of truth and innovation. Her journey didn't stop there. With the NYU scholarship, Ellie finished medical school earlier than expected, graduating with top honors, her mother's smile seeming to shine from afar. She founded a scholarship fund in her mother's name to help young people like herself, those who once believed dreams were a luxury. "This is for Mom, for Sophie, and for those unseen," she said at graduation, voice choked, as Sophie and Nathan applauded from the front row. Her fund has already helped dozens of students, spreading hope across New York. The wedding was more than a union of Ellie and Nathan. It was the nurturing ground for happiness and inspiration. Now a real doctor, Ellie worked at a local hospital, bringing knowledge from Sterling Pharma to treat patients. Nathan, once a lonely CEO, now found joy in simple moments, playing piano with Sophie, attempting to bake, still unsuccessfully, with Ellie. James, still the loyal friend, visited often with coffee and playful jabs about Nathan's cooking skills. That night, in their Brooklyn apartment, Sophie's drawings hung everywhere. Ellie, Nathan, James, and their imaginary superhero team. Ellie sat beside Nathan, hand in hand, Sophie sleeping soundly on the couch, hugging her newest drawing, a happy family under the sunlight. "We did it, Nathan," Ellie whispered, her voice trembling. "A family, a dream, a future." Nathan kissed her forehead, his voice low. "You are my light, Ellie, and I'll never let it go out." Ellie smiled, her heart full as if all old wounds, from her mother, from abandoned dreams, from days as a waitress, had finally healed. Ellie Harper's journey, from waitress to doctor, from alone to family, proves that love, courage, and truth can light up the world. Sophie's piano echoed, Ellie smiling beside Nathan, her heart as light as if finding her true home. Has their journey moved you, made you smile, or inspired you to believe in dreams? Leave your thoughts in the comments, hit like, share, and subscribe to the True Millionaire Moments channel. Share a moment in your own life that made you happy, so we can spread joy together. Thank you for accompanying us. You are the greatest motivation for us to tell inspiring stories every day.